So a lot of schools think they have a staffing problem in pastoral care. I'm not convinced they do. I think that many schools have a systems problem, because when I speak to DSLs, safeguarding leads, pastoral teams, I hear the same thing over and over again. So they feel like they're firefighting, their referrals keep increasing, the emotional needs are getting heavier, they feel more complex, their staff are tired and stretched, and then every term feels more reactive than the last. And like, schools are not failing because they don't care enough. Most of the time they're trying really, really hard. But the issue is that pastoral systems are structurally built to respond to escalation and not prevent it. And that really changes everything. So today I want to talk about why schools feel permanently stuck in this kind of reaction mode, why their referrals keep growing, and then why earlier emotional understanding or awareness is one of the key missing pieces in prevention. So what's the current reality? Well, if you compare schools today to 10 years ago, the level of pastoral provision has actually expanded massively. So you've got more counsellors, more safeguarding processes, more initiatives, more CPOMs, more external referrals, more training, more parent communication, it's notification overload. And despite all of that, your pastoral team is still feeling stretched. It's not reducing in any way. Why is that? The reason is because the demand is increasing faster than the system can absorb it. And it's worth saying at this point, this isn't just a school's problem. Children and young people's mental health services are under massive pressure as well. They've got high referral volumes, massive waiting lists. But the result is that the intervention is beginning after the distress has already become visible. So maybe there's an attendance drop, maybe there's a behaviour change, a panic attack has happened, a safeguarding concern has really, really escalated, a teacher has maybe noticed something in the classroom, there's like a disengagement there or a behaviour concern, and then or a parent has raised a concern, and only at that point does the support kick in and actually start to activate, which means that schools are intervening at the exact point where the emotional difficulty has already disrupted either the learning or the relationships or behaviour, and that's not prevention. That is a late stage response. And there's a couple of issues. I think one of the biggest issues is that not every struggling student becomes disruptive. Some become quieter, so they disengage slowly, or they mask, or they kind of withdraw socially, or they kind of stop contributing in class, or there's like an emotional numbness that kind of comes on, or they internalize everything so that the emotion spills out somewhere else. And those students, they often sit below the intervention threshold for a really, really long time, because the schools are naturally designed to notice a visible problem first. So by the time a student like that is going to finally reach support services, they may have been struggling internally for months or years. I think one of the other issues is that, and schools don't talk about this one enough, but many young people do not understand what they're feeling. Not really, not deeply. They might say like generic terms like I'm stressed or I'm tired or I'm fine, but they struggle to actually specify or differentiate the emotion or the feeling. So is it anxiety, or am I just feeling really, really overwhelmed? Is it pressure, or am I completely petrified of failing? Or am I feeling lonely, or is it just or is it shame that I feel? And if a student can't accurately recognise what they're experiencing, how it feels in their body, where it sits internally, then accessing intervention becomes incredibly difficult, because awareness always comes before regulation. So you cannot communicate a need that you and yourself cannot identify, and you cannot regulate an emotion that you cannot recognise. And that's not a character flaw, that's just a developmental skill gap. So in schools we're teaching history, we're teaching maths, we're teaching PE, physical health, but emotional foundations and understanding is just often assumed rather than explicitly practiced. So I think that schools kind of unintentionally define prevention as more intervention, more pastoral services, more staff capacity. And they also think that it's referring faster and quicker and escalating things faster, and it's not. Prevention is helping students to recognise their internal states earlier. So that's before the attendance has dropped, or before the behaviour has deteriorated, or before that emotional distress becomes visible to everyone else. And that's a consistency thing. That's not an intensity thing. So you do not build strong emotional foundations or good emotional health through one well-being day a year or a mental health assembly every year. You build it through repeated habits. So that's small check-ins, that's reflection, that's a shared language, that's good routines. And in the same way that physical health is shaped by good repeated habits, emotional health is shaped in exactly the same way. So you can train your mind. And this really matters because pastoral teams are carrying a lot of emotional weight right now. And you've got your DSLs and pastoral leads. They're functioning as risk assessors. They're functioning as emotional regulators, mediators, mental health coordinators. They're crisis responders all the time. And especially at the top, where it might be kind of coming into one or two people who are making key decisions and dealing with a lot of the weight. They're trying to hold the systems together that is never actually designed for this volume of emotional demand. Which is why that so many pastoral staff feel permanently switched on, because they're constantly scanning, they're constantly anticipating, they're constantly reacting. And the issue is not that schools lack compassionate staff. The issue is that a reactive safeguarding system is actually quite easy to build, because a reactive system is what we as teachers know. It's procedure, and schools love procedure. It's policy, schools love policy, and it's tangible change. So schools love to be able to prove what they're doing, whereas a preventative culture is purely behavioural, and a behavioural culture only changes through small, consistent reps. You could argue it's a little bit more difficult. So when people hear this kind of emotional education term, they sometimes imagine therapy or like deep disclosure, or just adding another thing to do onto their staff. But actually, the schools seeing the strongest cultural shift are actually just doing simple things really consistently. So they're helping students to build emotional vocabulary, they're normalizing reflection, they're creating really low pressure, psychologically safe emotional check-ins, they're giving students language and understanding before a crisis develops. Because once a student can identify their internal state earlier, there's a few things that happen. So they'll be able to communicate their needs sooner. Teachers will then be able to support that conversation earlier when it happens. Pastoral teams are going to get earlier insight before an escalation. And that emotional difficulty is going to become easier to spot before it becomes a safeguarding emergency or an acute case. And that's what proactive culture looks like. It's not a fancy bells and whistles intervention. It's actually a very simple but consistently scaffolded structure. And so I believe that schools are trying incredibly hard to support young people right now, but many pastoral systems are carrying the burden of problems that have begun much earlier upstream. And so unless emotional awareness or understanding becomes part of the everyday school culture and not just an intervention culture, the team or the pastoral team is going to feel continually trapped in this kind of permanent reaction mode, which is one of the reasons why we built Counsel Cloud. So it's not here to replace your pastoral system. It's not here to create more workload. It's not here to kind of turn your school into a therapy space. It's here to help embed consistent emotional foundations into the everyday school life. And we found that prevention is rarely dramatic. I hate drama. It's just repeated consistency before a crisis appears. So if that resonates with you as a pastoral lead or a DSL or something similar, we'd be happy to have a conversation about how our framework can sit alongside your existing system. No pressure. It's just a practical discussion about how we'd go about building a calmer and more preventative school culture. Thanks for listening. That's all I've got for today. Thanks for sticking around to the end.